The Boy Who Lost His Face by Louis Sachar, Chapter 31. They finished their tea. Everybody who had to went to the bathroom, and at 11:45, they headed for Roger Delbrook's house. Ricky and Tori held hands. David was glad that Ricky liked Tori, although he would have liked to have been the one holding her hand. After all, he was the one who was about to get his face broken. "Wait," said Mo. Everybody stopped while Killer did some business in the middle of the sidewalk. "Okay," said Mo. "You should clean that up," said David. "Why?" "Someone might step in it." "So?" David stared at her. He didn't know why he was getting into this now. "You clean it up," said Mo. "I'll clean it up," said Tori. Using a stick, she pushed Killer's droppings off the sidewalk and into the bushes. David felt foolish. "I guess we're just a little tense," he said. "Yeah," said Mo. "Hey," she said, trying to sound upbeat. "We've got nothing to worry about. Roger's the one who should be worrying." "Yeah," Larry joined in, trying to sound enthusiastic. "And Glenn," said Ricky. "They're probably peeing in their pants right now," said Mo. Ricky laughed. They continued on to the Delbrooks' house. Tori held Ricky's hand again. "It's the house at the end of this street," Ricky said when they got to Commonwealth Circle, letting everyone know that he knew the way, that he wasn't just tagging along. They walked to the end of the cul-de-sac. "Wait here," said David. He walked alone to the front door. The house seemed quiet and dark, as if no one was home. Maybe Roger's afraid of me, he thought. Yeah, right. He was about to ring the bell. Then he stopped and pounded loudly on the door with his fist. He waited. "Sorry, we don't want any," said Roger, opening the door. His friends laughed. "Hey, Curly, zip your fly," said Ginger. They were all there. Randy, Scott, Alvin, Leslie, Ginger, and Glenn. "I've come for the cane," said David, trying to keep his voice from quivering. "Well, you're not getting the cane," said Roger in a whiny, mocking voice. His friends laughed. "Do yourself a favor, Ballinger," said Scott. "Go home." David glanced at his former friend. "This has nothing to do with you, Scotty," he said. "So just keep your kiss-ass nose out of it." Scott reddened. He started to reply, but seemed to gag on his words. He laughed scornfully. "Is this what you want?" asked Leslie, holding up the cane with the two heads and 4 green eyes. She handed it to Roger. "I'll fight you for it," David challenged Roger. "Winner gets the cane." Roger laughed. "Why should I fight for it?" he asked. "I already have it." His friends laughed again. David didn't know what to do. He had worried about a lot of things throughout his sleepless night, but it never occurred to him that Roger just wouldn't fight him. "You chicken?" he challenged. Roger laughed. "That's me," he said, smiling. David flipped him off. The smile left Roger's face. "Don't do that," he warned. David kept his middle finger pointed at Roger as he stepped back off the front stoop. Roger handed the cane to Randy. "You better take it back," he said, stepping outside. Take it back? David wondered. How would he do that? Keep his middle finger down and raise the other 4? "What are you smiling at?" demanded Roger. He hadn't realized he was smiling, but now he smiled even wider, keeping his finger pointed right at Roger's nose. "Look, he brought his gang," Alvin said, laughing as he followed Roger outside. "Some gang," said Roger. 3 big stooges, 1 little stooge, and... He stopped and looked at Randy. Randy reddened. David kept his finger raised as he glanced at Tori. Roger's fist banged into his ear. He stumbled backward but didn't fall. A second punch hit him in the side of the neck. He held his arms in front of his face for protection. As he tried to get his balance so he could fight back, Roger's fist smashed through his arms, into his nose. David swung weakly back at Roger. He heard Mo cheering. "Come on, David, get him," as Roger slugged him in the stomach. Roger grabbed David's shirt collar with his left hand and hit him in the face again and again with the front and back of his right fist. David felt like a rag doll, unable to protect himself or fight back. At last, his shirt collar ripped off in Roger's hand, and he fell dizzily to the ground. As he looked up at Roger, he realized something he wished he had realized a lot sooner. He didn't know how to fight. He didn't know how to defend himself or even throw a punch. Ricky flung himself at Glenn, and the 2 boys fell to the ground. They rolled around in the grass, grabbing and clawing at each other. "Hey, Mo, is that your sister?" asked Alvin, pointing at Killer. Mo pushed him. "You afraid to fight a girl?" she challenged. "No," said Alvin. He slammed his open hand into her nose and mouth. She fell to the ground. Alvin brought his leg back, like he was about to kick her, but stopped. "Ah, she's crying," he said. Larry took off his blue sunglasses. David realized something else, too. He could stand the pain. Sure, it hurt, but not that much. He pulled himself to his feet and charged wildly at Roger. Ricky had Glenn in a headlock and kept tightening his grip as Glenn helplessly kicked his legs. Scott had one arm around Ginger and the other around Leslie. Tori slowly walked toward them. "Yeah!" shouted Larry, jumping in front of Alvin. He tried to remember everything he learned in his kung fu class in Indianapolis. His hands were like steel plates, but his arms and legs were fluid like water. He was in tune with his center of balance. "What are you supposed to be?" asked Alvin. Larry kicked him in the stomach. Glenn twisted out of the headlock, jammed his elbow into Ricky's side, and climbed on top of him. Ricky kept a hand on Glenn's face, trying to push him back. Glenn punched him in the eye, but it was with his left hand and not very hard. Tori pushed her way past Scott and continued on toward Randy, who was sitting on the front step holding the cane in his lap. She sat down next to him. David ducked under Roger's flying fist and charged at him. They both fell to the ground. David quickly lunged on top of him and punched Roger as hard as he could in the side of the face. Roger winced with pain. Killer sat in Mo's lap, licking the tears off her face. Larry tried to kick Alvin again, but this time Alvin caught Larry's foot in midair. Larry had the wind knocked out of him as he fell hard on his back. Alvin dragged him across the yard. Roger pushed David off him and punched him in his already bloody nose. He grabbed David's curly hair, pulled him into the bushes, and ground his face into the dirt. Tori and Randy stared into each other's eyes. Randy shrugged his shoulders. Alvin dragged Larry right through the middle of a bush, then dropped him in the dirt next to where David was lying. Ricky had Glenn pinned down. "You give up?" "No," Glenn groaned. "You give up?" Ricky asked again, pushing Glenn's chin back, stretching his neck. "No," Glenn gasped. Roger kicked Ricky in the side of the head. The next thing Ricky knew, he was lying on the ground next to Glenn. "You better leave my brother alone," Roger warned, standing over him. Larry coughed. David lay with his head in the dirt. He wasn't ready to lift it yet. He just needed to lie there. He closed his eyes. "Oh, I think I'm going to throw up," Larry moaned. He coughed again. David's head ached as he pulled himself up to his knees. He spat some dirt out of his mouth. Larry pulled himself up too. They stumbled across the yard. David wiped his face on his sleeve. Then he looked at the blood and dirt on his shirt. Mo handed Larry his blue sunglasses. "You were wonderful," she said, beaming. Tori walked up behind them and slipped her arm through David's. "Shall we take our leave, Mr. Ballinger?" she asked. She was holding the snakehead cane. Ricky and Glenn sat next to each other on the ground. "You had me," Glenn admitted, "until my brother went and kicked you. I can't believe he'd do that." Ricky shrugged. His head still throbbed. "Your brother's girlfriend is pretty," said Glenn. Ricky nodded. "Your brother's okay too," Glenn added. "He's the best," said Ricky. Roger shook his head as he looked down at Randy, who was still sitting on the front step. "Why the hell did you give her the cane?" he demanded. "She doesn't even like you," said Leslie. "She likes David." "Tell me something I don't know," said Randy. "We showed them," declared Larry behind his blue sunglasses as they headed away from the Delbrook house. "You better believe it," echoed Mo. "That's the last time anyone messes with us." "Did you see my kung fu?" asked Larry. "I learned that in Japan. Would you believe I only had one lesson? Man, if I just had a couple more lessons. But still, my first kick, whap, right in his gut." "Alvin now knows what it's like to feel the foot of Larry Clarksdale." "That's right," said Mo. "You stood up to him too, Mo," said Larry, "until he sucker punched you." "I may have been down," said Mo, "but I wasn't out." "You just had to watch Killer," said Ricky. Mo smiled at Ricky. "Right," she said. "I like the way you handled Glenn." "I did all right," said Ricky, "and he knows it. I mean, Glenn's not really a bad guy. He's just got a rotten brother." "Well, I have to admit Roger probably got the better of me," said David, limping on the cane. "But I got in one good punch, and he's going to remember that for a long, long time." "Better believe it," said Larry. "No one picks on my brother and gets away with it," Ricky said triumphantly. "Or mine," said David. "We went after the cane," said Larry, "and we got it." David raised the cane into the air, and they all cheered. "Couldn't have done it without Tori," said Mo. "She just walked right up to Randy and took the cane from him. He never knew what hit him." Tori smiled. She karate chopped the air in front of her. "Broke his heart right in two," she said with just a trace of sadness in her voice. And that's the end of chapter 31.